Hey, everybody, this is Perch. I've talked a lot about content that turns an audience off or places where you're running a risk. I often do it from the standpoint of why take certain chances. But I think that as I've listened to other people, one of the things about this show, and I'm not patting myself on the back that I'm the origin to everything, but I have noticed that a lot of other channels, including channels much bigger than mine, like 10x bigger than mine uh, are making points that I was making, 3 years ago, but they're doing it kind of stupid. So they're making the same point, but they've lost some of the nuance to the point. I'll give you an example, and I think it goes to, how what kind of things turn off an audience and what kind of things do not matter. Like what kind of audience gets turned off on a content, and what kind of risk should you take as a creator. So let me give you this example. If you're a comic book writer and you're writing, let's say a male comic, and what I mean by male comic is the main character is male. There are women that are in the comic, right? But the main character is male. Let's say, and this is Thor, all right? In fact, we're not going to make this a hypothetical. We'll use a real example. So you're Jason Aaron, and you're writing Thor, and you did a storyline. You went on to this book. You did a storyline called Gore the God Butcher. It got some people's attention. You have a pretty high profile artist on your book, and and you're basically people are like, yeah, it's pretty good comic book. It's doing good sales, right? And then you decide to do an event. This is original sin, and in this you're going to cause Thor to lose his hammer. Now the broader story here, your arc, your basic 5-year plan that you delivered to Marvel is that you're going to take over Thor, you're going to give him some challenges, you're going to cause him to lose his hammer because he's not worthy. Another person will step in and be Thor for a little bit of time, and then Thor is going to regain his hammer. He's eventually going to, his hammer will be restored, and he will have his hammer, and then he will, he'll be back to basically, I'm going to put him back in the box from where I started. And if you look at Jason Aaron's run, more or less, he ended it where it began, right? You started with, we started with Thor with the hammer. We ended with Thor with the hammer. And in the middle, there was a period of time where Thor didn't have the hammer because he was unworthy. And Jane Foster got the hammer. And so you got, woman Thor or girl Thor, depending on how you want to describe it. But anyway, you had Jane Foster Thor. And at the time when they did this, Marvel, a lot of people got busy with semantics. What I mean by that is they're like, well, on the hammer, it says, whoever holds the hammer, he shall be Thor. And it's a he. And Jane Foster is a she. So, and then the hammer, I think, changed the lettering to they, or I don't remember. But anyway, basically made it gender neutral. So, the no prize seekers could be like, okay. So, but anyway, this went on. And, there were cries of, oh, the title's gone woke. This is girl Thor. This is feminism. What are we doing? The man Thor isn't good enough. So you got to have a woman in the place and blah, blah, and on it went. And there was in the storyline, there was one, cringy bit of writing where, the absorbing man and Titania, all I'm hearing is tit, but anyway, where they're basically fighting along and, she gives up to, Jane Foster Thor because she's like, women got to have each other's backs. And it was dumb because she's a criminal. That doesn't make any fucking sense. And she's fought women before. It's not like, I don't know. That was just a weird statement in that. But anyway, the title got a lot of criticism online. Twitter is like, it's gone woke. It's terrible now. Sales plummeting. Comics are dead. Except if you've seen the sales video on Thor, sales went up for the Jane Foster run. It actually increased from the previous run. And the reason it increased, by the way, is for a very simple reason. There was a compelling mystery. Who is Thor? And people were buying. That's it. And Russell Downerman was a good artist and all those kinds of things. But fundamentally, people didn't start buying it because suddenly girl power. They started buying it because it was a well-written mystery. Or at least a mystery. And, sales went up. It wasn't what people said. So the lesson you could take from that is, if you're putting out a comic book and you include elements in your story that could be quote unquote woke, which sometimes means you're preaching at the customer. Sometimes it means there's a woman in the book. It could be that what makes it woke gets to be a pretty broad spectrum for some people. You're not splitting your audience. You're not subtracting from your audience. You just the audience actually went up because the storyline is what rules at the end of the day. By contrast, this is an element of something where people were objecting online and people were bitching, but it had no impact to the sales. Again, sales went up. By contrast, a creator that goes online and directly starts just shitting on the fans, a creator that comes online and starts saying, screw you guys, you're a bunch of misogynists, fuck everybody who voted for the candidate I don't like, don't buy my book, all kind of the Kelly Thompson approach, if you will. Not Kelly Thompson, sorry, Kelly Sue DeConnick. Sorry, Kelly Thompson. How could I mistake the woman who gave us Jeff the Land Shark with Kelly Sue DeConnick? Anyway, I'm not a fan of Jeff Landshark. So anyway, if you go online and you actually start directly kind of calling out the fans, going after the fans, you tend to see you do see an impact in sales. So why is it, and the internet will complain about you and everything, but you could see people complain about both a storyline element and a real world behavior of a creator, but only one really impacts sales. If the story is bad, it doesn't really matter whether it's woke or not woke or whatever it happens to be, people will slowly drift away from it. Usually not fast, usually slowly. If the story is good, people will slowly come into it and sales will go up, which is what happened with Thor. However, if the creator breaks the fourth wall and starts attacking the customers directly, then that is the thing that has the impact to sales. So why is all this important? The point I'm trying to make is that a lot of stuff gets called out as this is going to chase away readers, this is bad and everything else. But some things definitely do, and some things definitely don't. And the actual content itself rarely does. It's quality that either wins or loses readers. It's not politics or agenda. If you actually look at a famous scene, the time in Spider-Gwen when they had Donald Trump as MODOK, and that it was an annual, I believe it was an annual. If you look at that, the sales of Spider-Gwen didn't move. Lots of people bitched about it. The sales were low, but it didn't really have any significant impact. There were lots of people, and there were lots of them, and I believed pretty much none of them, who were like, I have been an avid Spider-Gwen reader, but no more. If you are butthurt by a Donald Trump MODOK, you are not buying Spider-Gwen. There's no way you are a loyal Spider-Gwen collector. And then suddenly there's a Donald Trump MODOK and now you're out. Like that's the straw that breaks the camel's back. There is no way that is you. So again, content in the book lives or dies by quality. Outside of the book lives or dies by just how egregious the creator gets and bitching about things. And and by the way, the normies, the vast majority of people are not wired to Twitter, so you actually have to do quite a bit before people take notice. You could actually, complain and complain and complain and complain. Eventually, you hit a saturation point, and it tends to be fairly sudden then. But that's the difference. So when we talk about, this content's gone woke, this content hasn't gone woke, and this is going to people are going to just chasing off the viewers, just chasing off the readers. Typically, things that are directly leveled at the readers or the customers, statements that are directly targeted to them have an impact on sales. Things that are, going on like, hey, here's a popular TV show and we're going to do a very special trans episode. It tends to not matter terribly when I'm talking about sales and ratings. It doesn't typically matter. The numbers prove that. If an episode is bad or if the episode feels too preachy, people will dip out. But the ratings tend to hover pretty much where they always were. I'll seal off one potential loophole somebody might bring up. It's like, but Perch, if the comics were ordered 3 months in advance, you really wouldn't see the impact of sales until 3 months later. Yeah, exactly. And what you see is the sales are highly consistent. They level out. little blips of quality that are or cringy areas that are put in a comic tend to not really have any impact in the overall sales. They tend to just level out. But if the creator decides to go into business for themselves and really start calling out people and making themselves into an asshole, then that tends to drive away people. And that drives away people more than I think people give it credit for. It's true. The majority of comic buyers, retailers are not wired to social media. So in many cases, they aren't seeing this stuff. However, they are very attuned to things that are going to impact their orders, things that might actually take sales away. And so these kinds of things, these, comments like, they basically are very aggressively leveled at the customer, that stuff tends to catch up with you fast. So the funny part is the advice here is be lazy. If you're a creator, focus on the content, focus on your book. Going out on your way to have Twitter wars is really the only thing that's going to hurt you for sales. And even there, you do have to go a long way, but it's kind of one of those cases of doing less is actually the right answer. Anyway, so that people have asked. So that's the answer. I look at the numbers a lot. I think there's a lot of like, when this comic went libtard, then that's when the sales all crashed. And that's actually there are very, very little examples of that, real examples of that. The examples where you see the sales fall off a cliff tend to have everything to do with random price hikes or, the quality of the book plummeted or the creator lost their mind and started just really making themselves into a nuisance to the point that it was just difficult to buy their book. There you go. I got no good way to end this other than say thanks for listening.